any tips for new writers getting started with a large story? Um, one thing I would do is say that you kind of have to just get a feel for how long the story needs to be. So you can decide beforehand how long it needs to be. And then, like if you're writing for a market, like if it's a short story and it needs to be between 3 and 5,000 words, you kind of want to settle on an idea and a pace that does that. Uh, what I would say is just write stories and figure out sort of the quickest way to get to where you're going. So even in a longer one, and this is one thing that I struggle with a little bit because I fall in love with the backstory that I come up with stuff. I had a friend that said when you start editing, you should cut from the beginning of the story. So every time you read a paragraph, you say, "Do I need that paragraph or can it go?" And every time that you say, "I can get rid of that paragraph," you keep cutting until you get to the first paragraph that you can't cut anymore. Like if you cut that paragraph, the story won't make any sense. And so his point is that a lot of people start stories too early. So you start with people driving to where they're going instead of what they do to get there. And he says some of that is that people try to get themselves into the story. So like a person will just start writing and not really know what they're going to do yet. So they kind of are introducing the character to themselves and the setting and spend a little too much time doing that because they're trying to figure out where the story's going. I'm tempted to do that a lot on stream, of course, because I got people watching me. So if I start with just a title and kind of an idea, I do kind of have to work myself in, but I try to do that quickly. In terms of if you're talking a large story, like you're getting into novellas and novels, practicing with short stories can help that a good bit. The longer you're going, the more you might benefit from outlining, so you kind of get an idea of where you think the story is going to go. My problem with outlining is that I'll do great outlines and have good detail, but within the first three, four, 5 chapters, I'm veering away from that. And so I may borrow from some of those things, but I've already taken the story in a different direction. Um, Generally, I would say the more you write, the better you get a feel for how long a story needs to be. And a lot of times, the the problem you'll get is you'll start to ramble. So the biggest danger, especially if you don't have a good sense of pacing, is that you'll just kind of keep writing and keep writing and keep writing, sort of circling endings and not really knowing where to land. And that you'll end up with pages and pages or chapters and chapters that really need to be cut to know where the story's going to go. Some people benefit from knowing where the beginning of a story is and where the ending's going to be, and so you have freedom to kind of weave around where you want to go, but you're getting somewhere, so you're not like searching for the ending. And it may end up being a different ending once you figure out who the characters are and what they're doing. Um, but one thing, like this month, I've been writing a story every single month, every single day this month, and so I've kind of gotten into the pattern of I'm writing a story, I'm editing yesterday's story, I'm reading a story that's finished, and I've found that more of those have been good than I expected. Like I had a couple stinkers in there. Not none of the stories I've done this month are the worst I've done. I've piled up some bad stories in the past, but a couple just weren't as great as I thought it would be. But there were a lot more with that were better than I expected. Now, again, I always caveat that by saying I never claim that any of these are the best stories ever written, but this month I've written some of the best stories I've ever written. And I think some of that was from kind of, working my way through some of those stinkers and figuring out what I didn't like about them. And so the stories that ended up being great for me were the ones that kind of built on the top of that. So uh, quality is better than quantity, but I think quantity of practice sometimes clears the way for quality. So, uh, one of those things I think that's very important, and we talk about doing a longer story, I think is the idea of figuring out the pacing, figuring out how to tell it in the length that you need and not ramble too much, kind of leave out the boring parts, as some famous authors have said. But I think practice gets you there. So I think you kind of have to mess up a few times. You have to write a few stories that ramble, and you have to write a few that don't really get to where they're going and don't really have a good middle or good ending. And then you figure out, okay, I don't want to do that again. And with practice, you kind of figure that out.